Listen, before we jump in, I want to tell you about our free program that you can sign up for. We know that great men aren't born, they are built. And without fathers and mentors, so many men are lacking the confidence and the tools that they need to grow strong. So this is literally why we created our BraveCo course. Our mission is to equip men with the tools that they need to build strong, powerful, capable lives. So our first phase, our phase 1 of BraveCo, it's 12 weeks long. It's called the Foundations of Masculinity. How did God create man? How do you set healthy boundaries? We take you through how to create an ethos, which is your mission, your vision, your values, to go, what does it mean to be a Valentin? What's it mean to be a Smith or a Johnson? What does it mean to be you? We walk you through all that stuff. Listen, man, we've had thousands of guys go through our courses, and I've seen everything from addictions break off to marriages completely restored. But mostly I've seen men walk out of there with a completely new set of tools to lead their life well. Guys, it's free. We've removed all the excuses. You can go sign up today at braveco.org. This is the BraveCo podcast. I'm your host, Jason Valentin. Welcome back to the BraveCo podcast, men. I want to tell you guys a story about my life 10 years ago. In 2009, which I know wasn't 10 years ago, but in 2009, I went through a really bad nervous breakdown. I've told you guys a bit about this before, but during that time, I lost use of my arms for a year and was incredibly hard. Fast forward to 2015. This will be really relevant in a minute, but I had worked my way out of the nervous breakdown, got on medication. 2015, I found myself at work I worked for Bethel Church. I oversaw our counseling departments and our emotional health departments at the church. And man, I was just struggling so much. I didn't feel motivated. I felt really depressed, honestly. And I'd been in this pattern of my life of feeling depressed for like a couple of years. And my wife would ask me a lot about it. I just didn't have any answers. I didn't. I don't know if you've ever felt like that before. Like I didn't know what was wrong with me, why I didn't feel motivated at work, why I wanted to fish all the time. It wasn't just anxiety, because I've had anxiety my whole life, but this was like depression. Didn't want to get out of bed. And one day I was in my garage. This is years of, probably 2-3 years of this going on. I was in my garage and it literally just came to me. Like it just like popped in my brain. I'm breaking my own promises. As it literally popped in my brain. And I was like, whoa. I thought about that for a minute and I started thinking through like, yeah, that's what's happening with me. I'm not proud of myself. I realized like I'm standing in my garage and I realized I don't respect me. I'm not proud of the choices that I'm making. Now, I wasn't looking at porn. There's no shame on you if that's the case in your life. I wasn't like, I don't know, I didn't have secret sin. But when I look at myself, when I looked at my life, I was sleeping in all the time. I was overweight, probably 20 pounds overweight. I wasn't pushing hard at work. I wasn't aiming at anything. I wasn't trying. I wasn't like running after stuff in my life. I was literally just doing what I had to do every single day, coming home and like, yeah, almost just the bare minimum. And the truth is, once I realized, oh my gosh, you're breaking your own promises. I hope this doesn't sound like so petty, because to me, so much of life, so much motivation, so much of who we are is in how you not just, feel about yourself, feel about life, is wrapped up in, do you respect you? Do you respect you? Guys, that thought, that realization changed everything for me. I literally went straight in from the garage inside and I said, babe, I just figured out what's been going on in me for years. She's like, what? I said, I'm not proud of me. I've been breaking my own promises. I don't show up to meetings on time. I don't work out when I say that I'm going to. I don't stick to the goals that I'm making. I literally, when I look at myself, I don't go, man, that guy inspires me. And of course, I think it's easy to see yourself in that light. We typically go to the next emotion, which is like shame, right? Like I try to shame, or I try to like alpha male myself out of that. Like you gotta get on your boat and paddle. You got to get on your bike and ride. You got to get on your horse, right? Like you typically like try to like our way out of these moments. And yet, I think for me, one of the first things I did was to actually figure out, why am I in this moment? Like nobody wants to not feel proud of themselves. And so we try to like power ourselves out of that instead of like, well, maybe I should understand, how did I get here? The reason why I started about with 2009 is 2009 set a trajectory for my life. It really did. I went through a divorce in 2007, but like I actually felt really powerful in 2007 and 2008. I was working out. I mean, I'm sure you guys could tell I haven't lost an inch. I was working out all the time. I was incredibly physically fit. Life was going really good, but I burned myself out doing too much. I literally did. And that's where my nervous breakdown came in. When my nervous breakdown happened, because I lost the use of my arms for a year, it created this mindset inside of me that I was fragile. So I literally, for years, I was afraid to walk a mile. My muscles twitched all the time. I had tons of joint pain and knee pain. I couldn't close my hands all the way because of joint pain from anxiety. And I was so terrified. Even after the joint pain went away, I was so terrified that it was going to happen again that I literally wouldn't do anything. I wouldn't fly fish for longer than like 30 minutes. All that kind of stuff. I had chronic tendonitis in my elbows for like 9 months, and I was just like a shell of myself. The worst thing that happened to me in my nervous breakdown wasn't losing my hands, wasn't waking up at night with a demon literally standing in front of me. It wasn't the crazy anxiety. The worst thing that happened to me is it changed how I saw me. It changed the way that I saw myself. And that messed me up. For 5 years, it messed me up. It created this type of passivity in my life that basically ruled my entire life, literally. I didn't want to confront anything. I didn't want to do hard things. I didn't want to wake up early. I was afraid to push my body. I was afraid to push myself mentally. I didn't want to crack again. I was afraid that I'd have to get on medication, all that stuff. And what changed me was starting to see myself different. What changed me was for me to start going, wait a minute, you're not fragile. You're strong. You're not weak. You've been called to be a king. You've been called to rule. And little by little by little by little, I started working out at my friend's house. I worked out through my tendonitis. I started like lifting small weights, little, small, tiny weights that honestly, it felt really humiliating because I hadn't done it in years and years and years. But I just went over my friend Chris's house and was like, hey man, this is kind of where I'm at. Like he just said like, man, just whatever you can do, just do it. So I just started lifting small and I slowly built up and built up and built up until I built some confidence. And I started waking up early and reminding myself the whole time I had to confront this thing inside of me that said, you're weak, you're fragile, you're not strong. And I don't know where you're at in your life. I don't know if your story is like mine, but here's what I do know is that when you wake up, you're asking yourself the same exact question I'm asking myself. You're asking yourself, am I proud of me? One way or another. Am I proud of me? Am I doing things that I'm proud of? Do I show up for my son? Do I show up for my daughter? Am I present with my wife? Am I pursuing my work, even if I don't enjoy it, even if it's not the funnest thing in the world? Like, am I proud of how I'm conducting myself as a man, as a leader? And there's probably, the answer to that. Let me just say the answer to that really decides a lot of things in your life. If you're wondering, man, Why don't I love my life? Why do I feel depressed? Why do I feel like, blah? It probably has something to do with that. Now, I just want to talk about passivity for a minute because we know that that was man's first sin, wasn't it? Passivity. You have God told Adam and Eve that they could eat anything except for the fruit off of this tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And we see, of course, Eve walks up and she's talking with the devil. He's in the form of a snake. And the devil convinces her that she's going to be more enlightened if she eats the fruit. And the fruit looks good. It looks incredible. And so she eats from the fruit. And then she hands it to Adam. The really interesting thing about the story is that Adam was standing right next to her when she ate it. It wasn't like Adam was out like hunting an animal and Eve was there and had this conversation. Like God gave Adam the instructions. He didn't give Eve instructions. Adam was the one that was supposed to give Eve the instruction not to eat the fruit. Adam watched Eve talk to the enemy and be convinced. And then he also partook. Okay. So back to this is man's first sin, passivity. When I think about not being proud of the decisions that I'm making, breaking my own promises, I think about this. I think about passivity. Why don't I wake up on time? Why don't I work out when I'm supposed to? Why don't I work out as hard as I want to? Right? Why don't I eat the things that I want to eat? I go back to like, when we begin to break our promises, usually it's because we're overwhelmed in an area. You think about one of the main reasons why you're passive. If it's passive in your relationship with your wife, it's not because you feel super powerful, right? Like, oh man, I feel really powerful. I feel powerful in my communication. I feel powerful I feel like she's proud of me. I feel like she really respects me. It's probably the opposite. It's like, oh, I feel overwhelmed. Our fights turn into chaos. We end up hurt all the time. I don't know how to deal with this pain that's going on inside of me. And so what we do is we avoid it. We're passive. We avoid it. We avoid what is overwhelming. See, I was in the same boat as you, different issue. I was avoiding the thing that was overwhelming to me. I felt fragile. I felt weak. I was terrified of ending up back in a nervous breakdown again. I mean, this is the biggest fear in my life. And so I did enough in my life to get by. I did enough to run my marriage. I did enough to lead my kids. I did enough to keep my job, but I didn't do more than that because it was overwhelming. I would get so overwhelmed. It showed up a lot in my life. I was writing a manual during this season. My dad was like, man, you need to teach people how you do what you do with counseling. So I put together this emotional prosperity manual, and it's literally a guide to counseling. It's awesome. Well, I started on it and I got like 3 chapters in and I didn't do anything for, I don't know, probably 9 months. And my dad came to my office one day and he said, hey, how's that manual going that you're working on? And I was like, oh man, you know how it feels when dad walks in or your boss walks in. I said, well, I'm 3 chapters in. He said, son, you've been 3 chapters in for 9 months. I was like, I know. And he wasn't shaming me. He said, son, why are you not doing it? Honestly, I didn't have an answer for him. I said, I don't know. I have no idea. He said, do you not have the content for it? I was like, honestly, I have all the content already in another form. I had literally this manual I've been working from years. It just wasn't in this form. He's like, what's going on with you? I said, I don't know, Dad. And as I started talking, I realized, I think if I write this manual, people are going to use it and they're going to read it and they're going to be like, oh, this is so dumb. I didn't even realize that I was avoiding finishing this manual because I was afraid that I was a fraud. I don't know if you've ever felt like that. But again, I was passive. I was like avoiding this thing, I was avoiding a accomplishment because I was afraid that I didn't have what it takes. So my dad said, well, let's do this. Let's send it to my friend. He's got like 3 degrees in psychology and he's incredible. So we sent him the manual and my dad said, hey, please don't do us any favors. My son, would you look at this manual? My son wrote it. He wants to know if it's accurate, if, whatever, all that stuff. And in Mark, his name's Mark Sharona, he wrote back and was like, honestly, it's incredible. And even after I got that, it wasn't enough to get me to move forward because of the way that I saw myself. I literally had to change the way that I saw myself in order to start to tackle these hard things in my life. And guys, I just want to say, if you're at a place in your life where you're feeling depressed, you're feeling like you are passive, you're not attacking life, I just want you to ask yourself, how proud of you are you? And I want to remind you that you won't shame yourself out of this. That's what your dad tried to do. That's what your coach tried to do. That's what maybe your brother tried to shame you to action. You can't do it. Here's why. It's because shame is pain. And eventually you will run from the shame because it's pain. So you won't even shame yourself into being a better person. You'll just eventually sink into like, it's not even worth, right? You'll just lower your standards so you don't feel as much shame, or you'll numb yourself. What you have to start to do is to go, okay, who has God called me to be? What has he said over my life? And listen, guys, don't try to solve it all at once, but just be really kind to yourself. What would be the first step today? For me, it was partnering up with my friend Chris and going and working out with him. Do what I can do, not what he can do. Don't judge myself against him. Just be proud of myself for showing up. Be proud of myself for pushing myself. Being able to hear and speak over yourself who God's calling you every single day. Guys, it's a complete game changer when you quit allowing the voice of shame and guilt and condemnation to talk to you every single day. And instead you go, you know what? I am agile. I am powerful. I have been called a king. I have been called an overcomer. Listen, if you're trying to change the way that you eat and you're not trying to change the way that you think first, it's not going to work. If you're trying to change the way that you show up to your wife and show up in your marriage, but you don't change the way that you think, it doesn't work. If you try to be a better dad, more present dad, more powerful dad, but you don't change the way that you see yourself and the way that you talk to yourself, it doesn't last. So to me, it's like set an alarm on your phone that says, this is who I am. Set an alarm on your phone that says, I'm powerful or I'm whatever. And words aren't enough, but words with action creates confidence, right? Confidence doesn't come from the words we speak. It comes from taking action, but you won't take action, lasting action, if you don't change the way that you see yourself. Go and read the Tiny Habits book or Atomic Habits. You'll see in there one of the main key components to actually building a strong new habit is by first adjusting how you see yourself. I am someone that brushes my teeth every night. I am someone that does healthy communication. I am someone that is strong and works out continually. If you don't change the way that you see yourself, you won't change your daily physical habits. You won't change the outcome. You'll do it for a small amount of time, but the first thing is to address the origin. So many of us want to address the outcome, right? Alpha male yourself up, pump yourself up, put on some David Goggins and run after, who's going to carry the boats and the logs? Yeah, that's going to help you for like 3 days. But if you change, if you start to go, you know what? I used to call myself fragile, whatever your thing is. I used to look at myself as lazy. I used to look at myself as someone who doesn't lead a marriage well. I used to look at myself as someone whose wife isn't proud of. I used to look at myself as someone who doesn't have a strong relationship with his kids. I used to look at myself, great. I'm not saying name it and proclaim it. I am saying you're going to have to address the lies that you believe in your head in order to be a man of action. And then be very, very okay with the small steps that it takes to be consistent day after day after day. Listen, one small step day after day after day is way better than one giant step one day. And so I just really want to encourage you. That was a area in my life that it took me a couple years to really master. It did. Honestly, it's the honest truth. It took a couple years to really fully dig myself all the way out of that pit. But it started by me addressing the origin of my problem. Yes, I went through a nervous breakdown. Yes, I lost the use of my arms. Yes, I had to get on medication. But the biggest issue was the same issue that the Israelites had. You can get the Israelites out of Egypt, right? They were slaves for 400 years in Egypt. And you can put them in the promised land where day after day after day after day, God is meeting them day in and day out. He is the fire by night and the cloud by day. He's giving them manna, food from heaven. He's feeding them. He's parting the sea. They're walking. He's doing miracles. What is he trying to do? Why is God leaving them in the wilderness to walk around the mountain? He was trying to change their mindset. See, because you can get the slave out of Egypt. Sorry, I just messed that line up. You can get the slave out of Egypt, but can you get Egypt out of the Israelite? That's the line. Can you get the old way, right? Can you get the old thinking out of the Israelites? And literally because they couldn't, because they were unwilling to change their mind. When they got to the promised land after 40 years, you guys all know what happens. They didn't want to go in. There's giants. We're going to get beaten up. We're small. We're fragile. We're weak. We were weak in their own eyes. They couldn't even see the fruit in front of them because of their old mindsets. We're slaves. We're insignificant. We're weak. What God wants to do in your life is the same thing that he did in my life. He took me out of Egypt. It set me into the promised land. And he goes, Jay, you got to address this mindset that you picked up when you went through this hell. Just think about it for 1 second, guys. I'm going to end here. If you went through hell, if you went through hard times, what was the mindset that you picked up from that? Have you addressed it? Have you changed it to how God sees you? If you haven't, this is the key. And it's not about it saying one time. It's not about saying it one time. It's about creating a new ecosystem. So guys, set alarms, literally set alarms on your phone that remind you. I had alarms set on my phone for years that reminded me, this is who I am. This is where I'm going. This is who you are. It changed everything for me. I want to pray for you. Father, I thank you, Lord, for these men who are incredible. Lord, I thank you that you want us to step into our mindset of actually being a saint, of being someone who's been cleaned up, someone who's been redeemed. Lord, you want to take us out of our places of darkness. It's the Psalms 23. It's the man who's been broken down, who's defeated, who's completely lost his ability to function. You lay him down, you pour into him, you revive him, then you send him back into the valley of the shadow of death. The difference is you're with him. God, I thank you that you're with us. You're sending us back into those places of strength. And I ask, Lord, that you strengthen every single man today, God. Amen. Guys, thank you so much. Go out there and be brave. Hey, BraveCo men. Hopefully you loved this week's episode. Listen, if you have not subscribed to our podcast, you are already behind. Go ahead and click right here to subscribe to our podcast. And if you have not watched last week's episode, you can click right here and watch last week's episode. And listen, if you want to upgrade your wardrobe, you can check out some of our new hats that we have in stock and all our other swag. Go to braveco.org and you can look at our store there. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.